behind the scenes right now to a wild meeting. We were just in Pittsburgh. We had J.D. Vance speaking at a town hall. And then we had some strategically positioned speakers right before them. So the Huffington Post and the who else was there? NPR and whatever else could all hear from Christian patriots. The one that I want you to catch now is Rick Green. He's speaking right in the segments before JD shows up, and he's emphasizing the historic validity of faith and the formation of our government. It's something which you all need because you're going to at some point have to give a defense for your worldview, and this is how you do it. Catch Rick Green under fire right here at a live event in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This is part of our Courage Tour. By the way, you could help me with the Courage Tour because it literally takes courage to go out there. In every one of these events, we have to support this thing as the body of Christ to go mobilize the leadership in the city. Would you please go to thecouragetour.com/support, and you can put your name down to sign up for being part of our future Courage Tours. We have great leaders and speakers coming in, and whether they're political or entertainers or celebrities. But I want you in the front lines of this battle. Thecouragetour.com/support. Stand with us. Your donation, your contribution of any amount will help us make a massive difference. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Rick Green of the Patriots Academy.
All right, I got 30 minutes. I have prepositional phrases longer than 30 minutes. So we're going to see how much I can get in here. I'm going to try to cover 4 major topics very quickly. Number one, I'm not going to spend much time on this one. America is the greatest nation in the history of the world. There's no doubt about it. Don't need to spend time convincing you of that. If you were unfortunately educated in a major institution in America in the last 40 years and lied to and indoctrinated, I'll solve all that for you in one quick If you got a college degree, unfortunately, or God forbid you went to graduate school or law school like I did, let me just fix all of that for you in one simple question, all right? If you're wondering whether or not America's good, if America's a great nation, if America's value system is worth defending, protecting, preserving, passing to the next generation, real easy way to figure this out. If you want to know whether or not it's a value system worth defending, ask yourself a very simple question. Are people trying to get in? Are they trying to get out? All right, there are people trying to get here because there's something valuable about America. It's called the American dream. You notice you've never heard of the North Korean dream. Nobody here is, digging tunnels to try to get into North Korea. Nobody's heard of the Cuban dream, right? It's the American dream. It is worth defending. It created the greatest nation in the history of the world. We could talk about that all day. We don't have time for it. All right, here's the second point, and this one's not so positive. The American culture is crumbling all around us. We have to be honest. We have to assess the patient in order to stop the bleeding. We have to recognize that every major institution in America has been taken over by the left. Education, the media, all of it, you name it, they control it. Virtually every political institution, now about half the pulpits in America. The left has been scratching and clawing for 100 years to get to where they are right now, and they're reaping the reward of all their hard work, which is the dismantling of the American value system and the American nation. Now, the good news, America's crumbling right on time. We are just less than 2 years from our 250th birthday, and that's the nature of man. Most great civilizations fall apart at 250 years. You say, why, Rick? Well, because you've all seen the memes. Tough times make tough men make good times make soft and weak men, and then that leads to tough times. That's just the cycle. It's the nature of man. What happens when you have good times? Man, you start enjoying the blessings of liberty. You start enjoying all the good stuff. You get to enjoy playing golf and coaching Little League and building a business and doing all of these things, doing your ministry, whatever it is that God's called you to do, and you enjoy these blessings of liberty, and you just kind of start forgetting about how to preserve the system that is allowing you to enjoy those blessings of liberty. You stop doing the hard work. Best way to describe that is this guy named George Mason. He was one of the 55 framers of the Constitution. He actually refused to sign the Constitution. He was not one of the ones that left during the middle of the convention, but he stayed through the whole thing. He influenced it greatly. 3 of the guys refused to sign at the very end because it didn't end slavery yet. It didn't have the Bill of Rights, but very influential on the document, George Mason. Also, we call him the father of the Bill of Rights because of his Virginia Declaration of Rights. But anyway, Mason said this. He said, no free government, nor the blessings of liberty can be preserved to any people, but by a frequent recurrence to fundamental principles. Now, what he's saying is, if you want the output side of the equation, freedom, prosperity, all the things that you would think of when you say, you know, this is the kind of nation I want to hand to my kids. If you want that output, those blessings, you have to look on the other side of the equation and say, what are the inputs that will produce that? What do I need to sow in order to reap that? What is the work that I need to do in order to get that reward? Because it's real simple, folks. Everything we're facing right now, garbage in, garbage out. Good stuff in, good stuff out. And we've allowed for really about 40, 50 years in our entire education system, the poison of cultural Marxism to be the garbage in, and now we're living with the garbage out in the culture. And so what Mason's trying to say to us is, remember what you need to do to produce a free society. I think of it like this. I like sports analogies. I'm a baseball guy. In fact, I actually think there's only 2 seasons, the baseball season and the off season. That's it. Everything else is, actually, I'm a UFC fan now, but because, you know, one of the few places you can actually have free speech these days in sports. but think about it like this. Best athlete on the planet has to go to spring training. You be the best pitcher, best second baseman, best whatever in baseball. If you skip spring training, you're going to have a lousy season. The best musician in the world goes back and runs the scales and practices. If you skip the preparation, it's going to be reflected in your performance. If one ball player skips spring training and has a lousy season, that's one thing. If everybody on the team skips spring training, the team's going to have a lousy season. If everybody in the league stops training and doing the things necessary, the whole league's going to fall apart. Well, folks, citizenship is just like that. Citizens have to do spring training. And if some of the nation is not doing the spring training, not going back and rediscovering that frequent recurrence to fundamental principles, well, they have to live with the results of that. But if the whole nation is refusing to do the spring training, the hard work, the investment of time and energy to study and to teach and to work on these things, then the nation falls apart. And that's exactly where we are. So we're crumbling, but we're crumbling right on time in the cycle of nations. And so my fourth point is this. We have an opportunity to interrupt the cycle of nations. We have at our fingertips all of the peaceful means that we need, the tools that we need to stop the tough times and get back to the good times because of the unique structure of the American political and economic system. And so the question is, will we do it? I'll explain to you how to do it, and then we have to answer the question, are we willing to do it? Are we willing to sacrifice our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor to make sure that our children and our grandchildren are able to live in freedom? And the way you interrupt the cycle, first of all, think about how you got there, by being soft, and by being soft and weak and not doing the hard work. We allowed this, this petri dish where bad government grows. It's called civic and biblical ignorance. All right, that's not an insult. I'm ignorant about a lot of things, okay? I can never figure out how to get the weed eater string back on my weed eater, spool, right? I'm ignorant about that. But I can solve that ignorance in 5 minutes on YouTube. I can go watch a video and learn how to get that straight. Now, it might take me an hour to actually do it, but in 5 minutes, I can solve the ignorance. The American people, we are ignorant right now, civically and biblically. The church is ignorant biblically right now. We don't study the Bible anymore. 9% of Christians study the Bible on a regular basis. So if we don't know truth, if we're not studying truth, if we're not literally saturated in truth, how in the world can we expect to recognize the lie?
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0. When I invented My Pillow, it had everything you'd ever want in a pillow. Well, now there's new technology that makes it even better. My Pillow 2.0 has my patented fill combined with a cooling fabric with temperature regulating thread. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
Now's the time to go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use the promo code to save 50% on your My Pillow 2.0. Not only that, for a limited time, your entire order ships absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
mypillow.com. Go to mypillow.com and use promo code Lance to save big on all of Mike's best products. That's promo code Lance.
How can we expect to counter the lie when our kids come home spewing some of this poison that they've been taught wherever it is. I talk to parents every day where the kids are coming home from these indoctrination institutions we call colleges around America, and the kids are telling the parents that the parents are the problem, that the parents are the poison. And so how do you counter that with truth if you don't know truth yourself? So we have to get saturated in truth, which is, of course, God's word. So that's actually the number one way to save America. This may sound counterintuitive, or maybe even to you it sounds cliche if you're a pastor or you're in ministry full time, but if you want to save America, the number one thing to do is be saturated in God's word. To be absolutely, you're studying it all the time so that all of a sudden some goofball running for office raises some policy to, give $25,000 to people to buy a house or something like that, which would be totally unconstitutional and economically stupid and, it just ridiculous. But if somebody does something like that, you need to know with a biblical answer. The Bible talks about economics about as much as it talks about anything. It talks about how to treat your neighbor, how to form a society. You know what Lance was saying about nationality and the philosophy that built America? I get so sick and tired of all these people saying, well, we don't want politics in the pulpit. What is politics? Politics is nothing more than how do you treat your neighbor? How will we treat our neighbors in our society, in our community? That's all politics is. I used to be a legislator in Texas. Every bill that I filed or passed or debated on the House floor, all of it, every issue. How are we going to treat our neighbors in this scenario? What's going to be legal in our community and what's not? How are we going to form our society? That's all politics is. Do you think the Bible speaks to that? Is there anything the Bible doesn't speak to? What part of our life is the Lord not Lord over? How in the world can we allow someone to convince us that, when you're in the pulpit, there's only certain things that are allowed? Because, the Great Commission says, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, teaching them to obey only those things that aren't politically controversial. Is that what it says? Teaching them to obey everything I've commanded. So there is nothing off limits. In fact, to put things off limits is burying the talent. You're literally hiding the instruction that the people need right now. The biblical perspective with all of the answers to everything that we face in our nation. So when people say no politics in the pulpit or just preach the gospel, well, what's the gospel? Go therefore and make disciples. Well, disciples need to know, how do I treat my neighbor? What do I do to influence my neighborhood in my HOA or my school board or my city council or my state legislature or my Congress? Those are all responsibilities that in a free nation we have. That's why rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's and unto God what is God's in America is very different than it was in the Roman Empire at that time. If you lived under a dictator, your responsibilities wouldn't be much. But you don't live under a dictator. In this nation, who is Caesar? You, that's right, we the people. You are Caesar. So if you're Caesar in America, we the people are ultimately responsible for what our government looks like. If you're Caesar, how do you do Caesar well? How do you do this job well? How do you do this in a Colossians 3:23 way? Everything we do the best that we can as unto God, not unto men. How do I live out my citizenship in a way that I'm honoring God, I'm taking care of the garden where I've been planted, and I'm actually not burying the talent of freedom, of voting, of influencing, of speaking, using my voice. I'm not burying that talent. Instead, I'm actually multiplying that talent. I'm working that talent. I'm being a force multiplier so that I can be the good and faithful servant instead of the wicked and slothful servant. We've been given such an incredible responsibility. So to interrupt that cycle and to prevent this nation from going into what Ronald Reagan warned would be 1,000 years of darkness, to prevent us from going into even multiple generations of darkness, we have to do the hard work in the tough times. And by the way, if you think these are tough times, we're just barely entering the tough times. It can get a whole lot worse. And we're actually at an inflection point where we have the peaceable means to interrupt this thing. And if we miss this opportunity, if we do not interrupt the cycle now, it will be incredibly costly to be able to stop the tough times. It will be so much worse than you can possibly imagine. If you think communism was an evil that did immeasurable evil in the last century, 100 million deaths to communism last century. If you think it was bad then, can you imagine if communism gets full control of the United States apparatus. You will see so much evil, you cannot even imagine it. We cannot let our sphere, our talent, our nation that we're responsible for be handed over to such an evil system of government and an evil economic system that will destroy 100 million will seem like a drop in the pan compared to what will happen if America gives full throttle all the way over to communism. So we don't have a choice here, folks. This is not one of those situations where it's like, oh, well, if you want to have some fun, get involved in this campaign over here. Hey, if you want to have some fun, have a Constitution class at your church. No, listen, this is do or die right now. We are literally at the precipice of losing America to an unimaginable evil. And it's not just, and I'm not just talking about the presidential campaign or your, Senate campaign or your local legislature. It's all of it. It's the whole system that we have to have our minds on because, November is going to come and go very quickly. And whatever happens in November, we got to be thinking about what am I going to do in January? What am I going to do next year? What am I doing to invest in freedom for the next 10 years? What am I doing to plant trees that I'm not even going to enjoy the shade of? In other words, we got to start thinking generationally and say, you know what, I'm going to be dead and gone, but if the Lord tarries, I want to make sure my kids and my grandkids have the best chance possible to live in freedom. That's the mindset that we've got to get into. And the good thing is that is a biblical mindset. That's a whole Psalm 78. Go read Psalm 78. The whole idea there is, are we passing the torch effectively to the next generation? Are we teaching them these truths so that they can live them out? And let's be honest, we failed at that in America. Okay, one of the big reasons we're entering the tough times is because of getting soft, we stopped teaching those things. We used to love the principles of liberty. We used to share, I don't care if you were a Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green Party, Daffy Duck Party, whatever party you were from, we used to share a love of American principles. It used to be that you could look at each other and say, you know what? I don't agree with what you're saying, but I'd fight and die for your right to do it. I'd fight and die for your right to say that. I'd fight and die for your right to live the way you want to live. We used to think like that in America from all sides. We used to actually believe that if you're accused of something, that no matter the color of your skin, no matter your political affiliation, no matter your religious affiliation or where you're from in the country, no matter how much money you had, that you had the exact same rights to defend yourself, that you had the exact same rights in the court of law, in the investigation, and all of those things. We used to believe that in America. In fact, we used to cherish that in America. In fact, we used to call it, even our comic books reflected it. What's the Superman theme? Truth, justice, and the American way. That used to be, it used to permeate everything in the culture, no matter where you turned. We valued that, and when someone violated it, we got righteously angry. You should be righteously angry right now at what they're doing to these J6 defendants, at what they're doing to Donald Trump, at what they're doing to all of these folks that just because they're on the other side of the political aisle, or they got the wrong color of skin, or they adhere to a particular faith, they're being treated differently. It should be blind justice, equal justice, everyone treated the same. We should all love that no matter what side of the aisle we're from. And you know what? That's a biblical concept. We're supposed to treat each other neither Jew nor Greek. And in court, neither rich or poor, everybody treated the same. We got to fall back in love with that idea. We got to fall back in love with the idea that you should be the one to make the major decisions about your life, not the government. Just a basic idea that the answer to these two words is at the heart of every question of how we're going to treat our neighbors. And the question is very simple: who decides? Who decides? If government, then which government? But government should only be the answer to that question in very rare scenarios. Most of the time, you should be the one to decide. Certainly whether or not you're going to take an injection of some experimental drug. Certainly whether or not you're going to put a face diaper on and inhibit your own breathing and breathe toxins all day. Certainly whether or not your children will go to a particular school or be taught certain things. The answer to those questions of who decides used to most of the time be you. But the Marxist has to replace you with government in the answer to who decides on everything. They want to completely control our lives and control our children. And so we have to once again come back to first principles, go through spring training once again, and say, I'm going to love liberty, but I have to learn about it. I have to understand it to be able to teach it to the people in my sphere, in my family, in my church, in my community. And so the solution to rebuilding this nation, instead of just crying about the fact that the culture is crumbling, actually picking up some pieces and rebuilding the walls, just like in the book of Nehemiah, the solution to that is that we have to solve this petri dish where bad government grows, that civic and biblical ignorance. That's where I was headed a while ago, and I got off on some tangents, but that is the problem. Civic and biblical ignorance allows bad government to grow because we don't know truth, we don't recognize the lie settles in, and then it becomes part of the culture. And so that's why you have all these crazy ideas going on in America right now that are completely un-American. That's why you have a big chunk of this nation that hates their own nation, that hates their fellow man, depending on color of skin and all of those things. The very opposite, of course, of what MLK's dream was, right? We're supposed to judge each other based on what? The content of our character, not the color of our skin. So we're doing the exact opposite of what we were supposed to do as Americans. So how do we do this? Let me give you my last 10 minutes, some of the things we can do to interrupt this cycle. Go to spring training, if you will, in turning this thing around. It's all found, the secret tool that the founders gave us is right there in the Declaration. Now, most of you know this part of the Declaration. You know the part, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Notice, by the way, truths were built on truth. We're built on the idea that there's a right and there's a wrong. Not this ridiculous moral relativism that says anything goes, everything's okay, you do you have your own truth. That leads to absolute chaos. That's where we are. We're in chaos because of moral relativism and getting away from truth, getting away from the fact that there are moral absolutes in the laws of nature and nature's God. And if we follow those, things go great. If we go against those, things don't go so great. And so coming back to, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their... No, you're endowed by Congress. No? Don't we get all of our rights from government? You a bunch of Christian nationalists? You actually think your freedom comes from God and not government? Well, God bless you, Pennsylvania. I'm in the right place. It is actually the very thing that separates America from everybody else in the world, from everything in history. That is how the founders turned everything on its head, was right there, that phrase. The fact that our freedom does not come from government. If our freedom comes from government, if we just get together and say, oh, we're gonna start society all over again. We're gonna put on our tie-dye shirts, stand around the trees, hold hands, sing Kumbaya. Say, I love you and you love me, and I confer freedom upon you and you confer freedom upon me. Well, we'll live happily ever after, right? No, because there's this thing called the depravity of man. And all of human history tells us that if we do that, someone among us is going to become stronger than everybody else and start taking away their freedom. So the only way you have freedom for everyone and keep that freedom is if you are not the source of my freedom, and I am not the source of your freedom. In fact, all of us, we get our freedom from the Creator, and therefore you don't have a right to take away my freedom, and therefore the only reason we have government is the next line. So we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights. So the whole purpose of government, to secure these rights. What rights? Truth, the pursuit of happiness, to do what you want with your property, not have government tell you what to do with your property, to raise your children the way you want to raise your children. Life, liberty, all of these rights, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So the only thing government can do is what you want it to. Consent of the governed. But that means you have to stand up and say, I give my consent or I refuse my consent. The system works if we work it. And because we sat on the sidelines for so long, the system is broken in so many ways right now. And it's gonna take time to fix it. We cannot expect this to be solved overnight. We've got to have a generational mindset and say, I'm gonna invest the time and energy and money and all the things it takes to turn this thing around. I'm not gonna give up because we lose an election or because we don't get a piece of legislation passed or whatever it might be. We're in this for a generation at least to turn this thing around. So that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Then he says that when any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. Now that's Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence saying, here's what we're doing and why we're doing it. Now, I am not at all an anarchist or for abolishing our entire government at all. In fact, I'm not even for, as great as Texas is, I'm not for Texas seceding. All right? I am absolutely for altering our government back to the forms that we were originally given. In other words, federalism, a constitutional republic, not a democracy. You are a threat to democracy. You're darn right you are. Because we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic. There's a huge difference. So we do need to alter, as Jefferson said, and yes, we do need to abolish the parts of our government that we never gave consent to, like the Department of Education at the federal level, like the EPA. We need to abolish the Center for Demented Confusion that we know of as the CDC. There's a whole lot of it that we never gave an okay to that we need to abolish, but we need to not be into this, oh, no government whatsoever, or get rid of the federal government completely. No, we need to become a republic of republics, just like we were designed. We need to be together as a nation. Texas and Pennsylvania are very different, but we're together under the Constitution for 3 reasons: defense, war, preventing anybody from taking us over; commerce, I want to sell things to you, you want to sell things to me and other Texans; and travel, to be able to move freely among the nation. Everything else should be up to you in Pennsylvania. I shouldn't be able to tell you how to educate your kids here. You shouldn't be able to tell me in Texas. So we got to restore that federalism, and that'll allow us to get back to true freedom. So we have to recognize that we have to alter or abolish. Now, how do we alter or abolish? How do we fix this thing? How do we restructure this thing? Number one, we become educated on how a constitutional republic works. That means you need to get into one of our Constitution classes immediately. I'm not talking like January. I'm saying you need to take Biblical Citizenship in Modern America and start it in the next 2 weeks. Watch this video right here on how to become a Constitution coach or host, and host one of these classes right there in your living room or at your church.
Everyone has something they're fighting for. Your family, your country. Today, those things are under attack by tyrannical government and cultural Marxism. But what if I told you there's a way to fight back? The Patriot Academy Constitution Coach Program is training hundreds of thousands of Americans all across this country on their constitutional rights and our founding principles.
Yeah, your coach program is just people like me. It's just average people and willing to learn together about our founding documents.
The Constitution Coach Program was a great opportunity to get people together to awaken their memory of who they are as Americans, to have them rendezvous with our founding fathers and our history, and to awaken that 1776 DNA that's in all of us as Americans.
If we don't know our rights, a tyrannical government will always abuse them.
The coach program is a way for people to serve their country by educating everyone in their sphere, everyone they come in contact with, about the Constitution and the founding documents.
Through Patriot Academy's Constitution courses, you can learn what our constitutional rights are and where those rights come from.
What a fun way to save the Republic is just to listen to these videos and to have classes with like-minded people.
America needs you to take a stand for truth, to learn the formula that created the greatest nation in history.
I think as humans, it's in us. We're designed to want to help people, and to serve and to love, and I think this is the best way to do it.
And the best news? Becoming a coach is absolutely free. But if freedom in America is going to live on, there must be enough of us that understand our rights, how to protect them, and pass freedom on to future generations. We need you. Sign up today to be a Constitution coach at patriotacademy.com/coach.
All right, everybody in this room can do it. That young lady right there, Tony, wave your hand. She'll be back there at our table, so go get signed up. She's the one that will help you get started in your community and be a part of that. We have to solve the civic ignorance piece, the biblical ignorance piece, by learning what does the Bible say about how to treat our neighbors, and how do we do that here in America under our Constitution. That takes time, so I'm asking you to give of your life, your time. And then I'm asking you to give of your fortune, to actually start investing in freedom, investing in candidates. Invest in this tour. Help Lance do these tours as much as possible across our nation. So don't just come here and be fed all day. Donate even more and be a part of investing in helping to save the nation. Help us at Patriot Academy. Donate $17.76 a month. Yes, we picked that on purpose. Become one of our 76ers and help us build out our campus so you can come train with us in Fredericksburg, Texas. but start investing more in your church. Your church has got to be the epicenter of the community. If we want government to shrink, the church has got to grow and start meeting the needs in the community. Tend the garden where you've been planted. Listen, our weapons today are our voices, our votes, our money. We don't want to fight a kinetic civil war in this nation. That would be horrible beyond anything you can possibly imagine. Our weapons are our voices. We've got to stand up and speak. So sacred honor, when we say lies, fortune, sacred honor is you being willing to stand up and say, I'm going to speak truth no matter what it costs me. I'm going to say what the Bible says is true. I'm going to influence the culture. You can influence the culture. If you don't believe in the Bible, fine. You can just speak your mind, and we'll have reason, and we'll debate, and we'll see whose ideas actually produce the best results. But we have got to be willing to stand up and say, I'm going to speak truth. Now, last thing, I'm going to invite you to come spend 5 days with me in Fredericksburg, Texas. I'm going to close out with this 1-minute video. You need to come enjoy the Patriot experience. You will go home on fire. You will light a brush fire of liberty. It's happening all over the nation. It's time for us to stand up and give of our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor, and restore this great constitutional republic. Thank you, guys.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to navigate the world.